Yuji, I read a statement that's attributed to you. It says, nature is not interested in creating a perfect being, but its interest is to create a perfect species. What do you mean by that?
We have for centuries been made to believe that the end product of human evolution, if there is one, I don't know for sure, is to create perfect beings. And that is modeled after the great spiritual teachers of mankind and their behavior patterns.
And by great spiritual teachers, you mean people like Jesus and Buddha?
All of them, all the great teachers, East, West, Occidental, Oriental, and Chinese teachers. And that is the basic problem we are confronted with. Whereas nature, I don't think I have any special insight, to use your word, into the laws of nature and what nature is trying to produce. And if there is any such thing as an end product of human evolution, and I don't know, even if there is such a thing as evolution, we take it for granted from what those people who have been doing research, trying to understand the laws of nature, assure us that there is such a thing as evolution. And you know, even today, some universities don't allow the students to study Darwin's the species. What is the title? The origin of species.
Yeah.
And his statements, to some extent, have been proved to be wrong, because he said that acquired characteristics cannot be transmitted to the succeeding generations. So every time they discover something new and they change their theories. So nature does not use anything as a model. It is only interested in perfecting the species. It is trying to create a perfect species, you see, not perfect beings. And we are not ready to accept that what nature has created in the form of human species is something extraordinary. It's unparalleled creation. And culture is interested in fitting the actions of all human beings into a common mold. And that's because they are interested in maintaining the status quo, the value system. That is where the real conflict is. This is something which cannot be fitted into that value system.
I suppose what I've been trying to do is I've been searching through what I have of what you've written and what you've said in various other media. And you come over as if you're like a universal pessimist. In fact, I was tempted to ask as my first question, given your position, why don't you commit suicide? Yet, obviously, you're a very lively person.
Since I have not come into the world of my own choice, I do not think I will opt for suicide.
Okay, well,
it's not a clever statement that I am making, but these labels that I am a pessimist and others are optimists do not really mean anything.
How would you characterize yourself?
All these labels have been put on me, and they put me in that framework of a pessimist, a nihilist, and an atheist sometimes, when I go to the extent of saying that God is irrelevant. If I make a statement like that, I don't mean that I'm questioning the existence of God, or I am not impressed by the theologians discussing everlastingly, trying to impress upon us through their dialectical thinking, cosmological, ontological, teleological proofs of the existence of God. We are not concerned with that at all. I am not concerned with that at all. It has become irrelevant to us because we use that, you see, to exploit, use that as an instrument of destruction. And we want to believe that God is on our side. You know, during the last World War, the Germans claimed that God was their co-pilot, and the Britishers also claimed that God was their co-pilot. Both of them destroyed life and property. So we would like God to be on our side all the time and use him. And what has come out of that is only violence. You see, belief in God or belief in anything separates us from others. When we find that we cannot force our beliefs on others, we would like everybody to believe the same thing. When we fail in that attempt of ours to make everybody believe in God or not God, or in political systems, right or the left, it naturally ends up in violence. So, sorry.
Well, I was going to say that's why I began with this whole question of nature, because what I find in what you're saying is a profound sense of nature, in a way, a profound sense of the absolute primitive reality of life itself, which seems to me an extraordinarily positive force and a force for good.
The fundamental mistake that humanity made somewhere along the line was, or whatever is the correct verb, to experience this separateness from the totality of life. At that time, there occurred in man, includes woman, this self-consciousness which separated from the life around. He was so isolated, and that frightened him. And the demand to be part of the totality of life around him created this tremendous demand for something ultimate goal, the spiritual goals, or God, truth, reality, to help him to become part of the whole again. But the very attempt on the part of us to become one with, or to become integrated with the totality of life, kept us separate all the time. And out of this demand to be one with the totality of things around, isolated functioning is not part of nature. Created the demand for thinking, to find out the ways and means of becoming one. But the thought in its very nature can only create problems, cannot help us to solve the problem and become one with it. We don't seem to realize that it is the thought that is separating us from the totality of things, and the demand that this is the one that can help us to keep that totality always there, is not going to succeed. So it has come up with all kinds of ingenious, if I may use that word, ideas of insight, intuition, and name it. There are so many things, you know. We don't have any plethora of words. You know, it is said that Shakespeare, that great playwright and a poet, his vocabulary was figured to be only 4,000 words. If that is true, I don't know. But now we have how many thousands and thousands of words. We come up with all and every kind of phrases to cover up this, the impossibility of trying to use those words to understand the reality of things. You see, that is where the real problem is. We have not succeeded so far, but that is all that we are left with. We cannot question that, we cannot brush thought aside, and we know in a way that it is not the one that can help us, but it is only creating the problems. We are not ready to throw that out and find out if there is any other way, if there is any answer that you can come up with or anybody can come up with to keep this unity, the oneness of life, a fact in our lives.
One of the things that strikes me as you speak is how, in many ways, it is related to the kind of underlying philosophy of Hinduism. I mean, Hinduism speaks of the original unity of all things, in a way.
No, I'm not for a moment expounding Hinduism. There in India, they think that I am not a Hindu and they are not ready to accept what I am saying. And what you are saying seems to be true, but the way you are putting things is not acceptable. They brush me aside. But at the same time, they can't totally brush me aside because they try to fit me always into that framework they have of, or the reference point they have. If they cannot do that, the whole tradition in which they have a tremendous investment is at stake. So they have necessarily tried to fit me into that framework. So far, nobody has succeeded. Many philosophers in India have been asked about my statements, and they know, say, that they can very well deal with any philosophy, any thinker, past and present, but they have some difficulty to fit me into any particular frame they know of. So they say that, you see, there is no way we can fit this man into any known cage. So what we have to do is to let the bird fly.
And I suppose that very free flying, of course, fits in perfectly with the very primitive nature of nature itself.
You know what the word religion means.
I'm not to tie down in a way.
I'm
yes.
not interested in the root meaning of the words at all, but it means to put you back to the source.
Yes.
On the other hand, it has created schisms. It is responsible for the tremendous amount of destruction of life and property. It's very unfortunate, but nevertheless, the fact does remain that it has failed in its purpose.
But it's also...
But we live in hope and die in hope that somehow the very same thing that has failed us, that it is still responsible for the impossibility of creating this harmony between the humans and the life around is still there.
But in a way, though, religion is also, I mean, admittedly, it's done many destructive things, but it's also done many creative things. I mean, great art, great literature, Shakespeare himself, in a way, are coming out of a basically religious experience. Certainly that's true of the West, which is coming out of a Christian experience.
That is true. That is why when a void is created, when all the systems have failed, there is a danger or a demand, depending upon your particular fancy, the religious stuff stepping into it and trying to tell us that we have the answers for the problems. But the revolutions have failed because they also have tried to fit their systems into a value system. I'm not against the value system, but the demand to fit ourselves into the value system is the cause of man's suffering.
Where then do we go? I don't want to ask a question of what's the purpose of life, because I mean, obviously, as you're speaking, that's really not a relevant question.
No, it is a relevant question, but it's born out of the assumption that we know about life. See, nobody knows anything about life. We have only a conceptual ideations and meditations of life. And even the scientists who are trying to understand life, its origin, come up with theories, definitions of life. We really do not know anything about life. And all thought, you may not agree with me and your listeners may not accept my statement, that all our thinking is dead. It is born out of dead ideas. So the thought or the thinking mechanism trying to touch life, experience life, and capture that life and give expression to that life is an impossible task. So what we are concerned about is living. The living is our relationship with our fellow beings, with the life around. And when we have everything that we can reasonably ask for, all the material comforts that you have in the West, the question naturally arises, is that all? Is that all? If the moment you pose that question to yourself, we have created a problem. If that is all, then what is the next step to take? but we are not ready. So we do not see any meaning in our life. And so we pose this question to ourselves and throw these questions at others who you think they have answers. What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? It may have its own meaning, it may have its own purpose. By understanding the meaning of life and the purpose of life, we are not going to improve, change, modify, or alter our behavior patterns in any way. But there is a hope that by understanding the meaning of life, there may not be any meaning of life. If it has a meaning of life, it is already in operation there. Our wanting to understand the meaning of life seems to be a futile attempt on our parts. We go on asking the questions. Once a very old gentleman, 95-year-old gentleman, who is considered to be a great spiritual man, who taught all the time, you see, the great scriptures to his followers. He heard that I was there in the town. He came to me and asked me 2 questions. He said, what's the meaning of life? I have written hundreds of books telling people all about the meaning of life and purpose of life, quoting all the scriptures, interpreting them. I haven't understood the meaning of life. You are the one who can give the answer to me. Then I told him, look here, you are 95 years old. You haven't understood the meaning of life. When are you going to understand the meaning of life? There may not be any meaning of life. And the next question he asked me is, I have lived 95 years. I'm going to die one of these days. I want to know what will happen after death. I said, you may not live long. To know anything about death, you have to die. So are you ready to die? As long as you are asking the question, what is death? What is there after death? You are already dead. These are all dead questions. A living man would never ask those questions.
Let's ask then another question, which is not, if you like, an intellectual question, and it is, I suppose, the question I was trying to frame a little earlier, and that is the question, what should we do?
We have been centuries told what to do. And why we are asking the same question, what to do? What to do is in relationship with what? So what I am emphasizing is that the demand to bring about a change in ourselves is the cause of our suffering. I may say that there is nothing there to be changed. And the revolutionary teachers come and tell us there must be something to bring about, there is something there in which you have to bring about a radical revolution. And we assume that there is such a thing as a soul, that there is such a thing as a spirit, that there is such a thing as I. What I assert all the time is that I haven't found anything like I there, any center there, any self there, any soul there. This question haunted me all through my life. And suddenly it hit me that there is no self to realize what the hell you have been doing all the time. That hits you like, you see, lightning, you know. When once that hits you, the whole mechanism of the body that is controlled by this thought is shattered. And what is left with is the tremendous living organism with an intelligence of its own. And what you are left with is the pulse, the beat and throb of life. That's all that is there. And there must be something more. And we have to do some things to become part of the whole thing. These questions have arisen because of our assumption that we have been created for a grander purpose other than this species on this planet. That's the fundamental mistake we made, the culture made, in assuming and believing that we are different, that we are made for a different purpose other than the life around us, and that the whole creation is for the benefit of man. So that demand to use nature for our purposes has created all these ecological problems. It's not such an easy thing for us to deal with these problems. We may have reached a point where there is no way of going back. You may say that I'm a pessimist again, But the point is that probably we have arrived at a point where there is no way of going back. And what is the fate of mankind? What is one to do? Anything that is born out of thought is destructive in its nature. That is why I very often say in all my conversations, in all my interviews, that thought in its birth, in its nature, in its expression and in its action, fascist. So the thought is interested in protecting itself, and it is always creating frontiers around it, and it wants to protect the frontiers. That is why we create frontiers around us, our family, our nations, and then see this planet for the entire use of mankind. I'm talking all the time. What is your third question?
No, I'm fascinated because, in fact, it's one of the most consistently intellectual conversations I've had for a long time. It's
whatever else I may or may not have been, I have never been an intellectual. When people ask me questions, I say I'm illiterate.
Well, you're certainly, your logic is absolutely consistent. I mean, if one were to look at you just in terms of formal logic, the consistency of your position in a way is unassailable. And it seems to me that that is a kind of a product of thought, a product of the rational mind. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is why do, I mean, it would seem to me that the best thing to do is to do in some ways what some of the Christian mystics did when they come to the assumption, when they say that God is nothing to us. St. John of the Cross, the Spanish mystic, says this, for instance. Eckhart, they go, that's right.
Remarkable people. Huh?
And so that leads then to a silence almost, to an end. Why do you speak, I suppose, is the question.
Why do I speak?
Yes.
Why do I speak? Am I speaking? No, it may sound very funny to you. Yesterday, in my conversation with John Lewis, I use this simile. I have nothing to say, and what I am saying is not born out of my thinking. You may not accept that. You see, it is not a logically certain premise that I am putting across. It may sound funny to you, and you have put me in a very precarious spot, asking me why I am talking. You see, am I talking? Really, I am not. You see, there is nobody who is talking. And I use this simile of a ventriloquist, you see. And he is actually carrying on the dialogue and attributes it to the dummy, or what do you call that one, whatever it is, yes. You see. So in exactly the same way, all the questions are born out of the answers we already have. And any answer anybody gives should put an answer to the end to the questions. But it does not put an end to the questions. But we are not ready to accept the fact that all the questions are born out of the answers. If the question goes, the answers we take for granted, they also go with the question. We are not ready to throw the answers away because the sentiment comes into the picture. The tremendous investment we have and the faith we have in the teachers also is at stake. So there we are not ready to brush aside the answers. Actually, we do not want answers for the questions. And the assumption that the questions are different from the questioner is false. So if the answer goes, the questioner also goes. The questioner is nothing but the answers. So that is really the problem. We are not ready to accept the answer because it will put an end to the answers which we have accepted as the real answers for that.
And so we keep asking questions.
Asking the questions.
Yes. And where would we be in radio without a few questions to ask?
And you have asked questions, I have tried to give answers.
I'll just check, how long have we got on that tape? Okay, right.
23 minutes more.
No, we've got 7 minutes left.
All right, sir.
Yes, I'm going to get my money's worth out. I mean,
You're most welcome.
I was. Do you see, Yuji? Do you see us as two separate people here? Are we separate people, or are we just part of that universal life force?
There is no way I can separate myself, except when I use the knowledge which is common to us both. So there is no way I can create this individual here and experience that there is such a thing as a human body here, that there is something that is talking here. There is nobody who is talking. It's just a computer, you know. And you are interested in operating the computer. Whatever is coming out of me is the printout. That you think is the answers. But what I'm trying to say is, I have no image of myself. I have no way I can create the image. The only instruments I have are the sensory perceptions. Sensory perceptions function independently. There is no such thing as a coordinator who is coordinating all these sensory perceptions and create an image there. Since I have no way I can create an image here within me, I have no way of creating an image there and put you there. So it does not mean that, you see, I am this microphone, I am Mr. Paul Collins, and no way. You see, it's not that way. I am the table, I am the microphone, I am this glass of water, I am this visitor's card. Not at all. There is no way I can separate myself except through the help of the knowledge which is our common property and answer your questions. So that's the only way I can experience things. Actually, what we see here is the opposite of what we would like to be, what we want to be, what we ought to be or should be. Otherwise, there is no way you can create an image of yourself. Since you see you want to be something other than what you are, that is what the culture has put in there. You create something which is the opposite of it. This is all the time struggling to be something other than what it is. So what is here is the opposite of what you would like to be. And so this creates the time. So the thought can never conceive the possibility of achieving anything except in time. So it does not want to let go this image which is created by what you would like to be, what you ought to be, what you should be. That's really the problem. So what is going on here are the two persons exchanging ideas here. I really don't know. I have no way of experiencing at all. If you ask me the question, who is it that is talking? It takes a little time because the computer takes a little time to come up with the information that is there. Mm-hmm. But we assume that our memory is very fast, but actually memory is slower than the activity of the sensory perceptions. There is an illusion that the memory is all the time there trying to capture everything within the framework of the memory, but the illusion is created by the mind to maintain the continuity of our identity. That's all that is there. So we can't afford to let go the identity. Whether you are asleep, awake, or dreaming, this identity is all the time there, and we do not want to let go that identity. I'm saying that it is useless or any such thing. His interest is to maintain the continuity of that. When the identity is not there, you have no way of identifying yourself with anything except through the help of knowledge. So I do accept, like anybody else in this world, the reality of the world as it is imposed on me. Otherwise, I would end up in the loony bin, singing Looney Tunes and merry melodies. But at the same time, I know that the thought is functional in its nature. It cannot help me to achieve something which I am not.
Thank you.
Thank you.